Now we will create proxy endpoint URL for the actual implementation URL. For this implementation URL we will create a proxy for this. We will not give this URL directly to the consumer whoever calling this any API or any other app calling this. We're not giving this URL for the security reason. We have to create a proxy for this one, and that proxy we will be sharing that. We will see how we can do that proxy configuration here. So for that, go to the API manager here, and there is a manage API here manage API from exchange. Already our API specification is moved to exchange. If you open the exchange here, so you can see that payment APIs we push to exchange. So this one we are using here. Now I'll go back to API manager. So manage API, click the option manage API from exchange. So I'll search this payment API. So payment API is coming now. So it's getting it from the exchange. So automatically asset type, API version and API asset version are got filled. So here asset version, everything is got filled from the exchange. So now here I'll choose endpoint with proxy, and the target is Cloud Hub. Mule version is Mule 4. You can choose other versions if you want, if it supports. Then the implementation URI. So you have to put that implementation URI. You already implemented it and it deployed to Cloud Hub. If you see that last time we checked in the Postman, so this is the implementation URI. So if you see this is the implementation URI backend. We are directly hitting backend in this case when you first time. So here we are passing payments, then the query parameters. Though this is the backend URL. So I'll copy this and I'll use it here. Now I'm pasting it. So this becomes the endpoint URL. So now keep the other fields as it is and click save. So you can see this payment API 1.0, then the API status is unregistered. Currently the status is unregistered. So you need to deploy this to be status active. So if you go down again, this is the API instance ID created. So if you go down here, then it will ask for the runtime version. So runtime version you can choose 4.4 Mule version. Then the application name you have to enter. This is the actually proxy endpoint, proxy application name. If you give, I'll give proxy URL for payment, okay, payment API, proxy URL for payment API. So this will, if you add this URL, it will automatically add .cloudhub.io at the back, at the last, and also no need to add the HTTP here. It will automatically create the proxy endpoint here now. So I'll deploy it, then it will be in the active instance will be created in the API manager. I'll click deploy now. So it's deploying. So starting application. So I'll click here to check the logs. So if I open this, so you can see now this is getting deployed proxy URL for payment API. So you can see the logs, worker logs. If you go back to the applications here, you can see this is one, the backend one, actual implementation, it's already started. The other one we did proxy for this backend, so that is deploying now. So when we call this proxy, it will call this implementation and get the response back and send it back to the consumer. We will share this URL. If you click on this is the URL, proxy URL for payment API. This URL will be sharing to the consumer now. So whatever the policies we want to apply will apply on this proxy URL, not on the implementation. So it will be hidden from the consumer. It takes some time to deploy and start the application. Still running. Now this instance is running. Close this and you can see the logs. So the status is started now, and if you see the logs, so worker log, so we can see which port it's listening. So you can check it here. You can see 8081 port. Now we go back to this API manager. So I'll go back here. So here, if you see, this status is active now, payment API. This is the instance ID. If you open this, now status is active. Earlier it was unregistered, now it's active. Also you can see this implementation URL. This is backend URL, actual backend. So we are hitting this URL through this proxy. This proxy details you can see here. This is the proxy application name, and this is the URL, proxy URL it created. When we given this names, it created this proxy URL. So using this, we can hit the service that will in turn call this backend URL here. So this way we can create the proxy endpoint for the implementation URL. Check the other options here. You can see view configuration details. You can see in the pictorial way. So this is the client. Client is calling through API gateway. So whatever your proxy you created, that is currently running on this API gateway. So whatever the policies we are applying on this gateway. So if you can see, after passing the gateway, it reaches the API implementation. That is actually your implementation URL. This one, if you see this is the actual backend what we had here starting. This is the backend URL now currently. So it will pass through this proxy. Proxy is employed in API gateway. That is cloud. It's a part of Cloud Hub. So this will give the complete details now, how client is calling, how it passes through the proxy and before reaching the actual implementation. We need to mention here this add consumer endpoint. When we are sharing the endpoint to consumer, that endpoint you have to give it here. We can give the same URL, proxy endpoint URL, and copy and paste it here. Before that, let's check the exchange here before adding the add consumer endpoint. So when you add it, customer can enter this URL to get the details. So now I'll go to the exchange. So just open the exchange to check how it's looking now. Go to the API instances. So here you can see this is the instance we got created now, that 174.19132 environment sandbox. This URL is not there now. So we have to add that consumer endpoint there, and you can see the changes here. That endpoint URL is showing here. So just add that endpoint URL here. So I'll copy this proxy URL and copy it to add endpoint here. Okay, just this one properly you have to must be a URL. Now properly construct this with proper protocol HTTP. You have to add it here. Okay, then it will become a valid endpoint. Now I'll just save this one and I click it outside. It's saving. So let's open the exchange now. So again I'm refreshing the exchange to check this consumer endpoint is visible here. So he can see now this consumer endpoint is visible here now. Also you can see this instance with numbers. It's difficult to remember what kind of instance name is this. So if you check this here, this instance name is coming like this here. So we can add a label to this instance so that it will be easy to recognize in other place also. Policy, I'll make it as policy 1. So I'm applying for this policy 1. So our instance 1. So I'll make it instance 1. So just save it, and then I'll go here and check this name should be changed to that instance 1 now. So now change to instance one. Now we can easily refer this one here and there. So now go back to the main page and check here on the right side the version 1.0.0. You can see mocking service and sandbox instance 1. You can see the both the things now here. If you want to test and check here what are the endpoint it's showing, so get, if I click on this and if I select mocking service, so it shows the URL, see mocking URL with 1.0.0 version. So and all the options, card, everything is showing here. When I send it, it will give the result. And this is here hitting the mocking service. If you want to hit the instance, so this is a proxy instance we created now, this proxy URL. If you see this, when you select this proxy URL for payment and slash payments and the URL and the query params, other options, and click hit. So this also gives the result. It's directly hitting that implementation URL and get the response back to the consumer like this. Currently this proxy endpoint is just a pass through. We haven't applied any policies to this proxy endpoint. So we'll do that in other sections, how to apply the policy to limit transaction, any other security features we can add to this proxy endpoint. Now we have tested this proxy endpoint and it is working fine. Now we will see the same thing in the developer portal. Let's go to the developer portal here and we'll check how it's displaying now. All the proxies is showing and only the mocking service is showing now. So we'll go and check this one, payments get. So you can see now, okay, this one mocking service and the sandbox instance. So I'll just check here, send. So it's showing now properly. Currently the portal is logged in with the proper authorized user. Now we'll open the developer portal in the incognito window so that it will not be logged in, and check this proxy instance is visible there. So let's test now. So here already is open. So this is the one we opened, get. So let's check now. So there is no option now. Earlier in actual case here we have both the options was showing, but in incognito window it is not showing the proxy instance. So why? Because this is not public now, this instance, it's only a private. So whoever authorized logged in user can access that. So other login can access this, so it's showing here. Now how to do this publicly available? Let's go to the exchange now and check there the options here. I'll go here now, open the API instances, and you can see here this currently it's private, the mocking service is public. So we can see in the portal now. I'll make this one as also public. Okay, now we'll go and check in the portal. Let's see when we see that proxy instance here. So I'm refreshing the portal now. So again I'll checking. So you can see both the things now, mocking service and also the sandbox. So this both the things we can test it now from the portal because we made it public. Anybody can access without logging in. Let's test once again in the Postman using this proxy endpoint. I'm copying this, and earlier I used direct this URL. Now I'll use the proxy endpoint. So this pay type card just came automatically because we already in the URL. So this URL is different, proxy endpoint. This is payment API. That's actual implementation. Now I'll hit this. So I'm getting the response. So 200. So now proxy endpoint is working now. So this way we'll configure the proxy endpoint for actual implementation URL.